Yeah.
Why are pharmacists so uncomfortable with asking for what we want?
The number one thing I said was, I just don't think we're taught the skills to market. The two questions that I have all of my interview prep clients work on is,
Welcome back to Success in Doses, where ambition meets real life, one bold, intentional dose at a time. I'm your host, Saley, and today's episode is all about one of the most powerful things you can do for your career, boldly asking for what you want. Whether you're negotiating your first job offer or finally ready to stop playing small, this episode is your permission to show up boldly. Joining me today is Dr. Ashley Klevens-Hayes, a pharmacist and author and career coach who teaches other pharmacists how to lead with confidence and own their value in the job market. And today she's giving us all a full dose of strategy, mindset, and real talk. Without further ado, let's dive in. Thank you, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us for our podcast episode today that I'm extremely excited about. Before we get started, I wanted to tell a story, and I did not warn.
I'm scared.
I'm scared. I did not warn you that I was going to tell this story because I don't even think you remember. In 2017, I was fresh out of residency and I attended APHA's Day in the Life, new practitioner day in the life in DC. And I was coming into the venue after getting coffee or something, and I almost knocked someone over. Right at the entrance, I almost I don't know why I was rushing like that to come inside. And 5 minutes later, they introduced our keynote speaker for the event, and it's you.
Did you almost knock me over?
I was like, oh my God, I almost killed our speaker. I almost killed our speaker. And that was my very first time meeting you and hearing you speak. And at the end, I remember all of us in the room asked you, how did you get so good at public speaking? Because it was one of the most engaging sessions that I'd seen. But what I remember the most about that day is something you said right at the end. It was so don't worry about whether or not who you are is ever going to be enough. Be extra. Take up all the space you want. And that resonated with me so much.
Oh my gosh,
and
I said that. Sometimes
you're
I look back and
don't remember.
It's something that I probably would say. But I can't say that I recall saying that specifically, but I feel like that's probably something I would say.
Yeah, I was sitting in the front and my eyes were so open. I was taking it all in. And so when I thought about topics for this podcast and thinking about asking for what you want, even that title in its own, I couldn't think of anyone else I wanted to have that conversation with but you, because I think that there's a lot of conditioning for us as pharmacists and young professionals that makes us incredibly uncomfortable with engaging in what we totally classify as difficult conversations.
Yeah.
For people who have no idea and it's the first time that they're seeing your face and hearing your voice, can you just introduce yourself to them?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I love the introduction already. And, it's funny when you go from knowing someone in virtual setting to then seeing them in person, you never know how much, how tall they are or their physical presence. And so a lot of people are shocked when they meet me in person because I'm really small. I'm 5'3", and I'm sometimes on a good day, I could be 5'3.5".
Yeah.
And so I think when people see me in person compared to when they hear me or when they see me online, they're like, oh, they don't really match that up. So getting knocked over, trampled on, kind of elbowed and pushed aside is not an abnormal thing for me because I'm small, I'm short, and I'm petite. So
it's the energy. There's a whole vibe around you that just, if we've never met you in person, we're thinking 6 feet plus.
It's like a buzzing thing. Yeah, I know. So nope, I'm definitely 5'3". So that's just a little bit of physical things about me. I am a pharmacist by training. So I went to the University of Southern California for pharmacy school. I graduated with a real strong vision and plan to be a CEO or a chief pharmacy officer of a large academic medical center. Wow. So my first steps out of pharmacy school were to do a 2-year health systems admin residency program program. Alongside that, at the University of Kentucky, I did my master's in healthcare administration, and I stepped into operations and managing technicians and pharmacists right away. I mean, I was the youngest at the table before I turned 30. I was going after it. And then, life happened and my husband's job took us to out of state. And so I really needed to get creative in my career. I took like kind of like an MSL role for a med startup company after my position at the academic medical center. And I helped that company and I leveraged that company to sell within 2 years of me starting.
Wow.
I got some equity and I kind of stopped. For the first time in my career, I had the opportunity to ask myself, what does success look like to me? What type of influence do I want to have? What type of impact do I want to create in my own career? And like I'm a big person about legacy. My dad passed away at a very young age, and he left behind such a strong legacy. I was and still am determined to do that for my own kids and my own family. So it was like a really pivotal point. This was in 2016 when I started blogging about my experience. And that was when blogs were big. I'm like an older millennial. And so that's kind of what we did to express ourselves. For better or worse, my blogs kind of went, I would say, viral. And that's when my RX Ashley really just took off. Since then, it's been almost 10 years. So almost a decade of doing this. And I have experienced speaking engagements all over the world. I've had over 7,000 students enrolled in my online courses. Do workshops, facilitations, team trainings, interview preparation. It's just been a really long, windy journey to get to where I am today. And my DNA, my backbone, like who I am, is a pharmacist at heart. But I've really had to get creative over the past several years, just because my life does not look like how it expected it to look when I graduated pharmacy. So my plan was to become a CEO or chief pharmacy officer of a large academic medical center. That is not exactly how my life panned out, but I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot and I've experienced a lot, and I'm just grateful to be where I am and to meet people like you. And I'm sorry, our first experience was almost a disaster for you, but I hope it's better. And I don't remember, so that's good.
I was like, I hope you don't remember. That's why as I'm telling it, I was like, I hope she doesn't remember. Because the moment you stepped up, I was like, oh God, I almost killed our speaker.
No, that's pretty, no, you definitely did kill me. Maybe we're high buzzing at the same time.
That's amazing. And I think you touched on something about being in the room before the age of 30, like being the youngest. That take us through, like, what does that feel like? Like, are you aware? Are you acutely aware of the unique positioning that you have when you walk into these meetings and sit at these tables and have these discussions that, I am having an only and one of the few moments right now?
So interesting. That's a great question. And what immediately came to mind was, no, I actually experienced the opposite of imposter syndrome. I don't know what it's called. I know there's some title to it, but I always felt really comfortable in those situations. It wasn't until I became an entrepreneur and I became on my own that I had this for like 5 years. I went through this whole trials of what am I doing with my life? I felt really safe in the health system. I felt really safe in the pharmacy role. I felt really comfortable with my peers and kind of trailblazing in that situation. It wasn't until I went through this whole transition of going from like an internal employee to kind of not being an employee to being my own, just me, and really stepping into my true self and really showcasing my strengths and my skills. That's really when I would say my confidence and I was tested the most. So I mean, obviously not the entire experience. I was full of confidence and radiant as a resident. No, my co-residents and my preceptors would laugh at that because I definitely I had insecurities and I had fears and I had doubts just like anyone else, but I did still feel like in my zone of genius. I did still feel like I was doing the right thing and I was in the right place. But I loved that role. I really it was just the best. I had so much fun and I felt really comfortable. Like life happened and, I'm married. So I had to really make all the things work, which is not spoken about in pharmacy school or in school. So I try my best to talk a little bit about that. But it wasn't until I really stepped out on my own did I feel like, what am I doing?
What is this? Why is this? This is not
I mean,
No, here.
almost 10 years later, I feel like, okay, I do know what I'm talking about. Now I can
Mm.
reflect on that. But in the first 5 years of kind of owning my own consulting business, owning my own space, I
Yeah.
was really kind of winging it, and wow, trial by fire.
Yeah, my
Mhm.
gosh, not trial by fire. And I think you touched on that, right? Pharmacy school focuses, understandably, on making sure that we know what we need to do to make sure we don't cause harm. But
Totally.
in where we are now, the opportunities for the PharmD quite
Hmm.
literally is limitless, right? Your first book talks about it. Your
Hmm.
first book
Hmm.
accentuates this really, really well. What do you think about that transition and all of the ways in which, in the work you do with students, in the work you do with young professionals, what is the missing piece there with how all of us are transitioning to that PharmD status in such different places? And what could work? Like, what are
Yeah,
some things that
it's
may
a really good
work?
question.
Yeah.
It's such a loaded question. I mean, a
Yeah.
few things come to mind is first and foremost, like we get into medicine, we get into healthcare because we're givers.
Yep.
No, we're natural caretakers. We naturally want to take care of people and help people. That's
100%.
just like our natural intuition. I don't know any of my friends or colleagues who really don't have that philosophy or who didn't go into pharmacy school, dental school, medical school with that mindset. Like I haven't come across many people who are in our profession who have anything different. So that transition from going from school mindset to learner mindset to then patient focused mindset to then, wait, I need to take care of myself mindset. That is just a really big learning curve because it's not our natural intuition to
Oh.
market ourselves or
Mhm.
to talk about ourselves or to
Mhm.
be confident in communication. It's just not something that we focus on early on in our career.
Yep.
I think we hyper focus on patient care, which
Yeah.
is good. I mean, that's
Mhm.
what's like the basic foundation of taking care of patients. You need to know the guidelines, you need to
Mhm.
know about standard of care, you need to know
Mhm.
about doing no harm, you need to know the right
Yeah.
medication at the right time, the right dose, all that. But then there just comes this time where you do all know that. You never become perfect at everything, but you feel more confident about the level
Yeah.
you're able to provide. And
Mhm.
then it's like, okay, well, then how do I get what I want? And I think a lot
Yes.
of practitioners, a lot of my clients, a lot of people who I work with have that they really struggle with that transition because we're never taught those skills.
Yes. Bringing us to the art of asking, bringing us to the art of asking. Why do you think, I say this often in that I feel like as pharmacists, so for me personally, for a very long time, my mentality was that I need to just focus on helping people. I want to help people. I want to help people. But then at some point, wanting to help people started to cross over into I also think that I should be paid and compensated fairly for
Yeah.
doing that, but then
Yeah.
felt very, very yucky with that feeling.
Yeah.
Why are pharmacists so uncomfortable with asking for
I
what we
know.
want?
The number one thing I said and was I just don't think we're taught the skills to market ourselves. We're
Yeah.
not taught that sales is okay. We're taught that, pharma is kind of yucky and that's like going to
Yes.
the dark side. And
Yes.
I just
Literally.
I totally disagree with that philosophy. I just can't. It's like a trigger point for me because if you don't take care of yourself and you don't ask for what you need, then how are we expected to take care of someone else? But with that said, I teach this every single day. And
Mhm.
I've been teaching this for almost 10 years now. And I still struggle with this stuff because it's ingrained in me.
Yeah.
It's something that I have to actively pay attention to. I have to be radically self-aware of these high stakes conversation. I have to practice. I have to prepare. I cannot wing any high stakes conversation or email or discussion with someone
Yeah.
who's a stakeholder.
Yep.
So I think there's just a mindset that we're supposed to know how to do things and that there's this expectation of high achievers like us that you're just supposed to be good at everything. You're just supposed to know. And I really push back on that philosophy because we weren't taught to self-advocate. And honestly, it's kind of like it's in our new era right now to
It
be.
really is.
It's not something that I was taught in my 20s or in graduate school or
No.
I don't know. It's something that I think this new generation is doing such a great job at and leveraging their skill set and being courageous, but at the same time, still working hard and I think getting the job done. So I think there's this like kind of this mix.
No, 100%. And I think that like the yuckiness that comes with it, it's because like many of your mentors, their first advice is put your head down, work hard, and your time will come. And it was this advice of wait your turn, work hard, your time will
Hmm.
come. Versus now, there's more of a transparency and
Yes.
more of an acceptable conversation that is the opposite of that of you better go get it. Whatever you want, you better
Yeah.
go after it because waiting for that permission and that turn in some queue, your number may never get called up. And then you end up with all this resentment when in actuality, there was no need to be
Well,
in line.
yeah. And I also think about knowing your role and what
Yeah,
role you are. What are the expectations? What are the
yeah,
deliverables that are expected of you?
yeah,
You know, who's holding you accountable? What systems are in place to make sure that you are achieving the goals and the deliverables that you're supposed to?
yeah,
I think we have dissonance when you over deliver and you expect something in return. And I think that's where burnout really stems from is we
yeah,
have passionate healthcare providers who just go after it. And ultimately there is some expectation of something in
yeah,
return that the harder you work, the more you work, the more value that you provide, the more you'll be compensated, the more you'll be rewarded. And in reality, it's not always the truth. And so that's a
yeah,
hard transition. That's a hard mindset to take in because in pharmacy school, you're told, like you just said, you know, put your head down and just get the work done, which there is some truth to that. There is
yeah,
truth to that. Pharmacy
yeah.
school is hard. I don't ever want to go back. So it's hard, but there's also this mindset of expectations and making sure that you know what the expectations are so you can deliver upon those, but also not over delivering. I mean, what's the point? Sometimes, you know?
Exactly. I know that's so true. And I think like also so before, like it wasn't until my third position that I ever knew that it was acceptable to negotiate.
Yeah.
Right? Like I thought that it was not acceptable to negotiate because whatever is going to get put in front of me, I need to just be grateful. Like I need to just be grateful that I'm being considered for the position. Advice on how to combat this. Like, why is that so dangerous? Let me just put it that way. Like why is that mentality really dangerous and harmful to anyone, no matter where you are in your career, you think?
Don't know. I have to push back a little bit. I think if you find a really great team and you love the role that you do, I think, and you feel like you're being compensated and there's some mutual exchange there,
Yeah.
I just think that's the sweet spot.
Yeah.
That is the sweet spot in anyone's career.
Yeah.
Unless you're willing to be an entrepreneur and take risk and make bold investments and get out capital and do all of that marketing and operation, it's a lot to own your own
The
business. And
lawyer,
so, yeah,
everything.
all that intellectual property, all that stuff. Yeah. So I just think that you have to find your sweet spot in your
Yeah.
career.
Yeah.
And that might look differently than what you expected it to,
Yeah.
but how you define success is up to you.
Yeah.
So I just do think that there is some gratefulness when I have a client that I love working with and I feel like I'm getting compensated well and I get a lot of value out of it and the person's getting or the company's getting a lot of value out of it. I am grateful.
Yeah.
Now, I think what you're talking about is not having bold conversations.
Yeah.
So, and avoiding difficult conversations. And I think that that really is where a lot of friction comes in for people is when they're in an avoidance mindset.
Yeah.
They don't ask the appropriate questions. They don't understand expectations.
Yep.
They don't know what they're really walking into, but they just need or want a job.
Yeah.
So I think that's just a different type of mindset.
And so you've touched on it a little bit. I want to ask the question straight up. What is something you think people should totally ask about on their job interviews and
I
do
just
not?
posted this today.
Oh,
Yeah, I think then there's two things that I think are really important. The two questions that I have all of my interview prep clients work on is if I started tomorrow, what would be my top three priorities? Like where would I be focused on? If I started tomorrow, what would
yeah.
be my first top three priorities? Like, what immediately
Wow.
would I be stepping into? And the second question that I like is in 6 months, you look back and you said, I was the best hire. What would you be doing? What would I be doing? What would that look like? Tell me, what would we be working on together?
Yeah.
And how would I, you know, How would I show my value?
Yes. Oh my
So those
gosh.
are the
Yeah.
two, I think, best questions. Now, that might be shifted depending upon where you are in your career
Mhm.
and if you're interviewing for pharmacy school versus residency or fellowship or your first job. Those types of questions, I think,
Yeah.
are really important to ask.
Very good. Oh,
It shows
wow.
that you're engaged. It shows that you have insight. It shows that you are prepared and that you have clarity on what to do when you first start in your job.
That's really important. And for somebody who is just scared, right?
Scared of what?
I'm somebody.
Scared of be
I'm
scared of.
somebody. I am deathly afraid of the
Needles?
compensation conversation.
Spiders?
Ooh, those two, Ashley. But
Yeah.
the compensation conversation scares me to no end.
Why?
I do not. I've gotten better at engaging about it. I think, like you mentioned something about you have to be cognizant and aware. And so knowing that, yes, this makes me uncomfortable, but I really need to sit in this discomfort right now because this is a conversation I absolutely want to engage in. At what point in your professional opinion, or no, going back to
Mhm.
asking, right? Like, the art of
Yeah.
asking. I think most people and most like it's residency graduation season. A bunch of people are looking for their first jobs. And
Yeah.
many of them, like, they ask me, how do I ask for negotiating?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. I think it depends on what you're stepping into. In a lot of hospitals or health systems or um, pharma companies, really just depends on where you're going, or startups. They all have different budgets. They all have different processes on how they manage their finances and their payroll. So as a W-2 employee, I think you need to go in with the mindset of a range of where you'll be happy at and where you feel like you're being compensated for appropriately for where you are in your career, what value you bring, and what deliverables that you'll have. And then you also need to be prepared to walk away if it's not being met, because sometimes they can only do what they can do.
That's true.
So if you're not happy and you're, first of all, you have to have the conversation.
Yeah.
You can't avoid it. Or if you avoid it, then you're just leaving money on the table. So you just will never know the answer to the question if you never talk about it. But
Yeah.
having an open, candid conversation about what your compensation, the compensation package, PTO, benefits, all of that, your education package, your car, if you get one, your stipend, just your vision, your health, and all of that goes into account here. Equity or bonuses, all of that gets really factored in.
Yeah.
But if you don't have any kind of conversation, then you're never going to know. So I'm the type of person that after now doing this for so long, I just like to know answers.
Yeah.
So instead of kind of beating around the bush, for lack of better terms, I just like to ask, like, what's the budget and what are we talking about? And I think, I can do this now confidently because I know the value I bring. I know that when someone works with me, what the outcome, and if they follow the roadmap that I have and the feedback that I have and my expertise, that the outcome is what's available to them.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to know who you're working with. And if you're working with a small startup, maybe their capital is less, maybe their budgets are less. I don't know. Maybe they have more. I don't know. You don't know unless you
You
ask.
don't. That's true.
So I think just asking for the budget right off the bat, like so many people wait until the end of the conversation before they start talking about money. And I'm like, why are you going to waste your time in these conversations? Like, just ask for it right up front. When you're talking to the recruiter or when you're talking, what's the budget for this role? That's like top 3 questions I ask even before I go on an interview. Like, what are we talking about here? Like, what are the deliverables and what are the expectations? Part-time? Is this full-time? Is this contracted? Is this 1099? Are we W-2? There's just so many different factors. You can't be scared to have the conversation because it's really just knowledge.
It is. And for some reason, majority of us that are uncomfortable with these questions up front is I don't think that's our mindset, right? Like, so it's the mindset shift. Like, we don't see it as this is part of the data collection I need in the process of decision making. We're just like, if we ask about money or we bring up the conversation about money, then we're going to appear like all we care about.
I think it's the opposite.
Yeah.
I think the opposite is true. If you're speaking to a recruiter or a hiring manager, and if you do not ask about money or you do not ask about compensation, in my opinion, that's a red flag.
Yeah, that's a red flag. Okay. So we're
We need
getting,
to like be more efficient with our time.
especially because if it's not, I do agree with that because if it does not align and it is not mutually beneficial, like if I at the end of the conversation just kind of feel like I think they got what they wanted and I cannot clearly identify what I'm getting out of it, that's not a mutually beneficial offer. I have to walk away from that or decline that partnership or collaboration.
Exactly. Yeah,
You
you have to
know,
go into these conversations with this as a two-way street. They're
yeah,
not just hiring me, I'm also kind of hiring them too. Your job is one of the biggest aspects of your life, if not the biggest for
the
some people.
biggest. Yeah.
So having these conversations, it's really just should be part of the conversation. And I think, again, we're not taught the skills to negotiate in graduate school. I have tried to pitch this topic for years, but school is focused on teaching you the foundation of how to be an expert in your niche. That is there's no school that exists out there. I mean, honestly, I can't think of one that is maybe some undergrad classes that is hyper focused on teaching you the skills on how to market yourself as an expert, how to invest in yourself as a professional, and how to continue as a lifelong expert in yourself. And so getting the skills on how to confidently talk about yourself, knowing what your strengths are is going to behoove you and help you along your career journey instead of the opposite.
Yeah.
It
And
just takes practice.
yeah.
It's so easy for me to sit here and say this, just to be clear. I am so good at telling other people how to do it. But then when it comes to me, I'm like, so I face the same situations. It's not
But
easy for me.
that's really comforting in a very weird way.
I
That's
know.
comforting.
That's why I love doing it to other people. It's so easy.
It's
It's
so
like, just
easy.
go out and do this. And then they're like, can you do it for me? I'm like, no,
Yeah.
no, you got this.
Yes, that's not how this works. So I encourage my listeners a lot about small doses, small incremental steps that they can take towards whatever their own
Mhm.
version of success is that's going to build up to something. What advice would you have in this realm about simple mindset shifts that we can all employ today in either how we view our role, ourselves, or just our professional lives in general? Small, simple mindset shifts we can employ to help us become a little bit better at asking
Mhm.
for what we want.
I would say number one, first and foremost, slow down.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us are running at, 100 miles an hour because we were taught that doing more is more and better and stronger. We're taught to pack on our CV and
Yeah.
to join every organization, do every event, go to every interview,
Yeah.
everything, all the things. I've had to really unwire that.
Yeah.
So I think the first thing, if you can pause and ask yourself how I'm spending each day and what I'm giving and who I'm giving my energy and expertise to, I
Yeah.
think those are really, really loaded questions for you to
Yeah.
start thinking differently and kind of unwiring old, kind of being a cycle breaker in your own thoughts with doing more is better. Because I don't think that's true.
No, I know it has not been true for me.
Working hard is important, of
It's
course,
very,
and being gritty and willing to roll up your sleeves and
yeah,
doing the work. Yes, absolutely essential. But we're beyond that. I know all the listeners here are all high achievers. So I'm not talking about an audience full of lazy people. That's not
yeah,
me. What we need to do is be more intentional with our time and know who we're giving our energy and expertise to.
absolutely. For this question to wrap us up is what's a dose of advice you'd give your younger self?
Oh my gosh, that's hard. Start sooner.
Sooner. I love that. Tell us a little bit more.
I have a tendency to know what I need to do, but
Yeah.
I struggle with the start.
Yeah, that's powerful. And all the high achievers listening right now can identify with that too much. Because even just from my own personal journey, it's the vision and how I'm going to do it. It's all super clear in my mind, but pulling the trigger of saying it's time to go, that takes a little bit of time. So start sooner. I cannot thank you enough because you do bring 6'10" energy. Even even virtually, you do bring 6'10" energy. I appreciate you. I appreciate your support. I value your voice in this space. And I think it's important for me to tell you that because you were one of the first people that normalized that being myself, taking up that space if I wanted to. Hearing someone say that out loud when I've thought it quietly that day, it really did do something for me. And I don't know if I ever told you that, but I wanted to have you on this platform because I respect and value your voice and what you do and what you talk about in this space. I think it's meaningful work, and I really and truly hope that the listeners can also find value in it. Today, for everybody who's going to listen and tune into this podcast, I am giving away free copies of Dr. Ashley Cleven's latest book. And
Oh my gosh.
yes, this is what definitely a surprise. I will be giving a free copy of Dr. Cleven's book. And if you get on our Instagram pages, we will tell you exactly how you can win a free copy of the third book. And Dr. Cleven's socials would all be linked in the show's description. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you joining.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Of course. So now that it's just us, I want to talk to you a little bit about what we got to learn from Dr. Ashley Klevens-Hayes today. She talked to us about, yes, the importance of the courage it takes to speak up, but asking the uncomfortable questions. Understanding that there is nothing easy about it. I love the transparency with which she talked about the fact that these are still things that she's personally working on, despite the fact that she's like an expert and has been phenomenal at guiding and helping other people, asking the difficult questions, asking for what you want, and making sure that the things we say yes to are things that are going to be mutually beneficial. And as you heard her say, her advice to your younger self is to start sooner. I can't stop thinking about that. And again, it's because it resonates with me. And I hope that that resonates with you as well in the theme that you will hear on this podcast more than once, which is define success for yourself and understanding what your own definitions and metrics of success is. And also, you do not have to be ready to start. You can start from wherever you are and work on whatever the thing is. Don't wait for permission. As always, I am so grateful that you are here and you are listening, and I cannot wait to connect with you on the next episode. If what you heard on this episode speaks to you or you know anyone else that would benefit from listening today, please like, share, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and follow our socials across all of the platform. That is Success and Doses Pod on Instagram as well as YouTube. Thank you so much for being here, and I cannot wait for us to get into more conversations like this that are thought-provoking on the next episode. Bye, everyone.